The Knicks head into the upcoming season with a new head coach and the highest of bars to clear now. The Eastern Conference Finals, yeah, that's not cutting it. Not with the Pacers and the Celtics looking at down years because of injuries. It's there for the taking. So, Mike Brown, welcome to New York. And by the way, you got to make the NBA Finals out of the gates. With that in mind, we say hello to Kyle Draper from NBC Sports California, voice of the Sacramento Kings. Kyle, I wanted to bring you in on this because you're a guy that's been around Mike Brown out there in Sacramento and had kind of inside access to him. I was around him in Cleveland years ago when he had his first go around with the Cavs, but that was a lifetime ago. I feel like this is a different Mike Brown. So I want to get a fresh perspective here on the coach that is now coming to save the New York Knicks, as it were. What are the Knicks getting in Mike Brown, the person?
Well, first of all, they're getting a fantastic person. I can't speak highly enough about Mike Brown. Even during my broadcast career, he's done some things behind the scenes that have made me a better broadcaster. I will say this, when he got the job here in Sacramento, I was talking to an assistant coach of another team, and they said, the thing about Mike Brown, whether you're the star player or you're the 15th man on the roster, you're going to feel him. He's going to touch you. And I've seen it in person, whether it's at practice. He'll go up to every single player, whether it's a two-way guy, a G League guy, put his hands on him, talk to him, really get to know him. And so he doesn't just coach the stars, he coaches the entire team. And I think it's a great hire for the Knicks. I think the guys will respond to what Mike Brown is preaching out there.
Obviously, he wasn't the first choice. I mean, I think the entire basketball world knows that the Knicks were kind of cold calling the rest of the NBA, seeing if, they could pry head coaches like Jason Kidd away from, the Mavs. Well, that didn't work out. So Mike Brown, I guess, if he's a fallback option, I think it's a good fallback option. Were you surprised, though, to hear Mike Brown and New York Knicks?
A little bit, because, obviously things didn't work out for him here in Sacramento, got fired back in December. I knew he would get another opportunity, but I didn't know he'd get an opportunity in New York with a ready-made team that's ready to compete for a championship. I'm happy for him, but you know how it is sometimes, John. You lose your job and you sort of have to rebuild your credibility, rebuild your cachet out there. But, the Knicks settled on him, and I think he'll do a fantastic job. The one thing I know about Mike Brown, and even talking to him before he got the Sacramento Kings job, he's learned at each step he's been at, whether it's Cleveland, the Lakers as an assistant with Golden State. So I think the Knicks will probably be getting the best version of Mike Brown to this point.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I remember in Cleveland, he was defensive minded. He was a guy that worked his way up through the system in San Antonio, a prodigy of Greg Popovich. And I remember some hard practices with the Cavs, and that was a tough balance because you've got a young superstar in LeBron James. But out in Sacramento, he became known as an offensive coach, didn't he? He kind of rebranded himself. How did he do that?
Yeah, I think, you got to give, not only him credit, but some of his assistant coaches. I do think at heart, Mike Brown is still a defensive-minded coach.
Okay.
And, I think even, when we watch today's NBA, as great of an offense as OKC and Indiana are, is out on the floor, it was their defense. It was OKC's defense, Indiana's defense.
Right.
And so you still got to be able to play some defense out there. But that's where I think Mike has probably mellowed out a little bit, if I can say that. It's not just his way. It's not the only way to win isn't his way. He's a little more flexible and a little more open to suggestions, I think.
What went wrong with Mike Brown in Sacramento?
Well, a couple of things. You talked about Mike in Cleveland and, how hard he worked in the practice. Like, Mike loves practice. Like, he loves to practice. And I think, his philosophy, this is just me talking, not him, but when things start to go sideways, it's to work harder, dial in more, watch more film, hunker down more. And sometimes you might need, all right, guys, take this day off, or let's go do this team bonding event. And so I feel like here in Sacramento, they had the 5-game losing streak at home in December with ownership sitting right there, the fan base in an uproar. And I felt like maybe the team decided it's easier to get rid of the coach than the players. Like something had to change or the season was going to go down the toilet. And they decided to get rid of the head coach. Now, I will say there was a huge part of the fan base that was not on board with that. People were up in arms. He was the best coach we've had since Rick Adelman 20 years ago, and now we let him go. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has success out there in New York. And the thing about it, if Tibbs can coach the guys hard like he did out there in New York, so can Mike Brown. But I do believe Mike Brown also has a softer side that'll play well in that Knicks locker room, too.
Who do you think on this Knicks roster, I mean, offensively especially, stands to benefit the most from a Mike Brown system? Because right now it all goes through Jalen Brunson. And I think the guy they really got to get going is Karl Anthony Towns.
Yeah. And that's who I was going to say. And that's who I was going to say. I think, when you look at Mike's resume, having coached some of the game's best big men, we could go back all the way to Tim Duncan, obviously, in San Antonio. And then when you have a guy like Karl Anthony Towns with such a unique skill set, from a coach's standpoint, I would love to have a guy that can do it all, whether it's on the low block or shoot the basketball. But from a coaching standpoint, I think Towns will benefit because Mike will challenge him on both ends of the floor, too. We've said it before, Mike's a defensive-minded coach. And so he's going to need Karl Anthony Towns to lock in defensively. But I think, part of that comes from earning a player's trust, right? And, once a player sees, you're out for his best interest, once he sees that whatever you say actually works on the floor, because that's what happened here in Sacramento. Mike Brown preached certain things and it worked. And that first year, everybody bought in. And so I expect the same thing out there in New York.
It's going to be fascinating to watch. I know LeBron James is always everybody wonders what's going on with LeBron now, right? And it's hard to swing any kind of a trade here for the Lakers just because of the contract situation, everything. But I mean, going back to day one with LeBron coming out of the draft, the Knicks have been a thing. They've just been like hanging out there. Are you hearing any kind of buzz out there at all in the NBA world about?
No, just the same.
Just because he seems like he's always flirting on the edge of it.
Hold up, John. Knicks fans think they could get everybody. Y'all thought y'all
I
could
know.
get Kobe.
That's kind of the way it goes.
Thought you could get Jordan. Come on, man. Not
the way it
everybody
goes.
wants to come to New York.
Well, now they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm just saying.
Right.
LeBron can't really stick around there in LA anymore.
Right. I'm not hearing anything of substance regarding LeBron James and the New York Knicks.
Fascinated to see how this plays out with Mike Brown, two-time NBA Coach of the Year, a guy who's coached superstars. He's coached in big spots. He's coached teams into the playoffs. We'll see what he could do here in New York. Kyle Draper from NBC Sports California. I really appreciate the time on a holiday weekend, man.
All right, John. Thanks, man.
Great insight.